welcome to Mental Health First Aid. My name is Denise Ellsbury, and this month we're doing a celebration show of sorts. Within the next month, we will have trained 10,000 people in mental health first aid through our Linden Oaks Instructor Consortium. We're really excited and proud of that, and I really wanted to focus on mental health first aid during our show this month. And so I've invited Jill Kluesner, who is a consultant with the National Council for Behavioral Health, to join me this month. Jill is a national instructor trainer of mental health first aid, and so we just really want to kind of talk about mental health first aid. So welcome and thank you for being here, Jill.
Thank you for having me, Denise.
So tell us how you got involved with mental health first aid with the National Council for Behavioral Health, and let's start there.
So the interest really started with kind of like a grassroots effort. We had a lot of individuals and stakeholders in our communities who were just trying to figure out what are ways that we can increase mental health education in our community. We knew the need was there. We just weren't sure which program we should start looking into to be able to provide that education in our community. When we heard about mental health first aid, we knew we wanted an instructor certified to teach in our community. So I was fortunate enough to be that instructor for my community. I got home from the instructor training and I thought, I'm going to put together some sort of flyer and get it out into my community to see what the interest really is. And within 48 hours, we had a full class and we had a wait list for people that really wanted the information. Yeah, so we knew that we had found a really good fit to meet that need in our community. So I started providing mental health first aid trainings in our community, and that momentum really built in our community and expanded throughout our state. So when I first was an instructor, we had about 20 instructors in the state of Iowa. I should be clear, I'm from Iowa. And within a couple years, we were able to build our instructor base quite extensively. I promoted a lot of what we did locally to the national level, letting people know what we were doing in both our rural and our urban communities. And that's how I got further involved with mental health first aid nationally. That spotlight on our communities, the spotlight on what was being done and the effectiveness of the program brought in some national attention in regards to what was being done. And so I joined the national trainer team, going into my 5th year now, where I actually get to teach individuals who are interested in becoming instructors how to teach this course in their local community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And we've known each other for a couple of years, and I always feel like you're such a great cheerleader, if I can use that word, for mental health first aid in terms of promoting the messages of the course and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, how many instructors are there of this curriculum kind of across the country?
Yeah, so when I first got trained, there was about 250 instructors in the country. Now we have well over 11,000 instructors across the country, teaching in all 50 states, and actually we have instructors in Puerto Rico and Guam as well. So it's really expanded a lot since I first started.
Yeah, and really this is an international program, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in well over 20 countries as well. So I always tell people, who want to get involved in mental health first aid, it's more than a local movement, it's more than a national movement, it really is an international movement to increase that awareness around mental illness.
Awesome. So when you think about mental health first aid, what are the messages when you're teaching the class or when you're training new instructors? What are kind of those key messages that you really want people to take away from the class?
Yeah. So the formal definition for mental health first aid is that it's the help offered to an individual who may be developing a mental health concern or experiencing a mental health crisis. And as a mental health first aider, we provide support to that individual until appropriate professional help can be engaged or until that crisis resolves. But really, when you boil it down, mental health first aid is about increasing mental health literacy in our communities so that we all have a common knowledge and understanding about what mental illness is, and then even more importantly, what we can do to support somebody in our lives who may be experiencing a mental health concern. So I always say increasing mental health literacy and decreasing stigma associated with mental illness.
Okay, all right. I like to kind of make that comparison to CPR a lot of times to say, that we're not here to be the experts on something, but really helping people be good noticers of when somebody might be experiencing any level of mental health distress, and then saying, hey, there's something we can all do to be of assistance to that person.
Right, exactly. So if you had a child who skidded their knee in physical first aid, we would make sure that an infection didn't happen and it didn't get to be something worse. Same with mental health first aid. It would be great if everybody was able to have those early intervention skills that people could notice when somebody's becoming unwell and provide that initial support and possibly prevent a further crisis down the road.
What are some of the maybe like primary misconceptions you think that people have about mental health or mental illness?
Yeah, so there's a lot of misconceptions out there. A lot of times individuals have misconceptions about the services that are available in their community, what the community has available to offer. I always share with individuals, there's been times in which people have asked me about, well, what is therapy? And there's a misconception that therapy can only occur one way in a particular setting. And so it's about educating individuals about all the different services that are available and how we can make those accessible for individuals who have a variety of different needs.
And you come from a more kind of rural community, correct?
Yeah.
How do you kind of teach mental health first aid, or are there differences offering it in more of a rural setting?
Yeah, so the messages are the same no matter where we're teaching mental health first aid. And you know this, right, as an instructor as well, those messages are always the same. But one thing that we're mindful of in our rural communities is availability and accessibility of resources. So I always say that we have to teach from a reality base as well as knowing what's available in our community. So we talk a lot about the availability and accessibility of resources, and thinking about community as beyond the actual geographic area in which somebody resides, and thinking about community as what's available in my state, what's available in my region, what's available nationally in regards to hotlines, websites, chat rooms, other resources. So I feel like when I teach locally, that accessibility and availability of resources is something we talk about, it seems, in much greater detail.
Yeah, I feel like in our community we might say like, oh, well, we've got a lot more, say, professional resources that people might have access to, but not everybody has the same accessibility. Depending on insurance or transportation, all of those kinds of things. So yeah, creating those different options for how people can access information and resources is really, really key to the program.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you are a national trainer of instructors. So what does that mean in terms of how you spend your time?
Yeah, so as a national trainer, I'm an independent contractor with the National Council for Behavioral Health. There's about 30 of us or so that are on this national training team. And it's our role to prepare instructors to teach in their communities. So instructors come and they're with us for about 5 days for kind of an intensive training experience to learn the curriculum, how to deliver the curriculum, again with that high fidelity. So we want courses in Anchorage, Alaska to look the same as our courses in Tampa Bay, as in Hawaii, so that fidelity piece. And really build up the confidence in instructors so that they can go back into their community and have a really great experience teaching this course.
Okay. So you're spending like a solid week with people, helping them really learn the material and feel confident about how they present the information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great. So we're going to take a break, but when we get back from the break, I'd like to talk maybe about some of the different curriculum models that are part of mental health first aid and how they apply to different audiences.
All right, great.
So join us after the break to hear more about some of those different models.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Mommy.
Llama al 1-888-971-2013 y obtén información para cuidar mejor a quien cuidó de ti.
Welcome back to Mental Health First Aid. We've been talking with Jill Kluesner, who is a national trainer of mental health first aid instructors. She's a consultant with the National Council for Behavioral Health. And we were kind of talking about some of the different modules that there are. Mental health first aid is the broad kind of category, but we've got some different kind of curriculum modules. What are some of those for different audiences?
Yeah, so as you described, we have the core curriculum that is for mental health first aid, and then these modules are things that help to enhance that core curriculum for some specific audiences.
Okay.
So for example, there are modules available for instructors to teach that would be for public safety. There's modules on higher education if you're working on the campuses or campus communities, older adult population. Let's say you're working in rural communities, so we have a rural and frontier module as well. And then there'll be a newly released fire and EMS module as well. So those modules, the goal is really that we can tailor some very specific information to those audiences to make sure it's really applicable to those audiences when they go to leave, that they can really apply the information to those specific professions.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes this really is a practice class. It's not just a lot of information, but we want people to take away some skills of things that they can actually do. So how kind of helping connect the skills to different audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So we might see some of the activities change. We might see that previously a scenario might have been an individual who was really struggling in their community, and now we see that scenario happening in possibly a public safety situation where that officer is determining how they would approach and engage that individual. So scenarios might be changed as a part of these specific modules. We see some additional videos added, again, to make it really applicable for the individuals that are taking it back to a specific type of profession.
Sure, sure. And so what are some of those different modules that you help teach?
Yeah, so I actually teach, one of the modules is for rural and frontier communities because I work in rural communities. And in that module we talk a little bit more about accessibility and availability of resources, as I alluded to earlier. And the module I actually teach most frequently is in regards to higher education.
Okay.
So I've done a lot of work on college campuses, making sure that we're educating campus communities, using the same skills as mental health first aid and applying those skills again to the college campus community. So in our scenarios, we're talking about how this applies in a student-to-student situation, faculty to faculty, faculty to student. We're really brainstorming not only how it applies on campus, but then what are the resources specific to the campus community and how we can use those when we leave the training experience.
Okay. And I would imagine within the different kind of topic areas in the course itself, emphasizing different kind of pieces of that. So for instance, in the substance use section, talking about what are some of the specific or particular situations that might happen on a college campus related to substance use concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that some of the prevalence, some of the statistics and data are a little bit different for the campus population versus other populations. And so not only in substance use, but if we think about anxiety, we know that there's a lot of stress and anxiety around this transition time in that young person's life, that student's life, that adult's life. And so we think about how we can apply those skills in those particular situations with students. And you know, Denise, I have to tell you that campuses have a really unique opportunity for what we call like high saturation mental health first aid.
Oh, sure.
Where you have a specific pocket of individuals who are consistently interacting with one another. And how amazing would that be if everybody had the same language and was using the same framework to support one another? So it really is a unique opportunity on campuses.
Yeah. So when you were talking about that, I was thinking the same thing then about you know, middle and high schools kind of, and boy, if you can get all of the staff in a middle and high school talking that same language about how do we help a young person, and if I talk about, you know, offering reassurance, we are all on the same page about what that means to offer reassurance to a young person.
Absolutely. And you know, in not only my community but across the country, we are seeing high schools and middle schools taking this curriculum and really doing, again, that high saturation where all faculty and staff within a middle school or high school are learning the same skills and how they're interacting with those youth, how they're supporting those youth, and everybody's using that same framework and how we're providing that support. It is really exciting.
Yeah. And I think sometimes what happens in those kind of environments is we tend to think like, well, we'll offer mental health first aid to the social workers or the psychologists, and it's sort of like, okay, well that's great, but they kind of already have some of this information. Let's think about how about your receptionist, your administrative assistants, who are sometimes right there in the front office when a young person walks in, when a student walks in and is visibly distressed, empowering them with some skills on what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently had somebody come through that was from transportation, and that person said, I always wanted to do something, but I just never wanted to do the wrong thing. So I just didn't say anything when I saw some concerns. And that person left feeling very empowered that they now had language in how they could support students if they had concerns, and who they could connect them to within the school system and the broader community if they had concerns about a student or if the family had concerns about their student.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we haven't really mentioned youth mental health first aid,
Yeah.
but what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, so youth mental health first aid, that's what we're alluding to when we're talking about working with schools. That's the curriculum that we would be using. So youth mental health first aid has that same core framework as the adult version with mental health first aid. So let me back it up. So mental health first aid is for adults supporting adults, right? So we're talking about over the age of 18. Youth mental health first aid is for the adults who frequently interact with youth and adolescents.
Okay.
And when we use that youth and adolescence type of language, we're talking about between the ages of around 12 to 18, that adolescent time frame. So individuals who get trained in youth mental health first aid are anybody who interacts with youth, right? So it could be a youth group leader. It could be the teachers, the faculty in a school system. I recently did a youth mental health first aid training yesterday, and I had law enforcement in my class, right? So really it's anybody who's interacting with youth and adolescents.
Nice. And giving them some skills about how to approach that young person and start a conversation maybe about what's going on for that young person.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And with youth mental health first aid, we also talk about development. What is typical adolescent development? And how can we tell the difference between typical adolescent development and when it might be a warning sign, right? How do we tell that difference, and how do we have that conversation?
Because I think sometimes people aren't always sure what they're seeing, or if this is something that is typical, or should I be worried about that?
Right, right. And one of the takeaways of the course is that we don't always know, and many times we don't know. So then it's important to know how to have a conversation, right?
Sure.
If we're not sure, we want to have the conversation with that youth.
Right.
Yeah.
Any kind of new curriculums or any curriculums we haven't mentioned yet that are kind of out there or being offered in terms of mental health first aid?
So the adult and the youth curriculum are the two core curriculums, and then again, with mental health first aid, it's the addition of those modules. I think we've touched on most of those modules, but I think the takeaway, the important thing to think about with those different kind of target audiences is that mental health first aid can be offered to any audience.
Yes.
Right. So although we have these specific tools that we can utilize to teach individuals in higher education additional skills, or we can teach rural and frontier communities additional skills, that really mental health first aid is applicable to everybody. I always say, how do you know if you should attend or not? It's, do you interact with people? Period. And that's how you can kind of determine, is a class a good fit for me?
Okay, all right. So that I'll remember that little kind of tagline about, do you see people? Do you talk to people during the day?
Absolutely.
And yes, then mental health first aid might be helpful for
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, great. So when we come back, let's talk about any kind of new things that are coming down the road, and especially let's talk about sort of the Be the Difference campaign that's going on with the National Council for Behavioral Health. So join us after the break.
Their support changed my life.
They were like family.
My voice is now heard.
A home for every animal.
My future is bright because they cared.
This is our home now.
Thank you to the 1,200 nonprofits that serve Cass and Clay counties every day.
Welcome back to Mental Health First Aid. We've been talking with Jill Kluesner, who is a mental health first aid trainer and instructor. So I kind of mentioned at the top of the show that at Linden Oaks we're really excited because we're celebrating training 10,000 people in mental health first aid since about 2010 is when we first started offering it. And yeah, so that's kind of a big accomplishment for us. And we hope to, continue to be able to offer that and continue the outreach, because I feel like, gosh, there's a lot of different audiences that we've trained, but there are a lot more people in our communities that interact with other people, right? Right? So we got a lot more people that we could
and so just think about that ripple effect, right? So think about, so you've trained 10,000 individuals, and how many people interact with people right. with those 10,000 individuals, and how much of an impact that can have on your community, the families that reside within your community, the workplaces that are being impacted in the school system. So congratulations to you and all your work and the work of all of the instructors and really everybody who's been involved with what you've been able to do here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it was the president of the health system, Mary Lou Mastro, who heard about mental health first aid and was like, we're going to do this. And I think she had some skeptics when she brought it back. Okay, what's this all about? But, the hospital system has really embraced the program and really sees the value of it.
Yeah.
So, nationwide, how many people have been trained in mental health first aid?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, our goal was to actually reach our 1 millionth person. That was a big goal that was set, and that was far surpassed. And so it's really exciting. We've gone from really a conversation about, is mental health first aid going to take off in the United States? What's that going to look like? To over 1 million people being trained. So as I said earlier, we have well over 11,000 instructors in the country, and well over 1 million people who've been trained in this this really life-saving curriculum.
Excellent,
Yeah.
Excellent. And so what are some of the, I mentioned the Be the Difference campaign. So what is that all about?
Yeah, so Be the One to Make a Difference is about that anyone, anywhere can be the difference.
Okay.
So what that means is with the appropriate skills, so by attending a course, right, anyone, anywhere can be that person to support somebody who might be struggling, support that individual who may be experiencing a crisis, support that young person in their life who might be developing a mental health concern. And that you don't have to be a clinician to be an awesome support for somebody. So it's anyone, anywhere can be the real difference for somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's some nice little promo things on encouraging. I love how that kind of comes through, like, a teacher, a librarian, a neighbor, a youth minister, all these different people
can be the difference. Yeah, and those promo pieces that you're referring to. So if you go to mentalhealthfirstaid.org, you can click on Be the Difference, and it will actually pull up some of the public service announcements. And so those include public service announcements from Dr. Oz, as well as Brandon and Mishi Marshall have done a public service announcement, and many other advocates and leaders in the mental health field, really promoting that anyone, again, can be the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I know another person that has really promoted mental health first aid is Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So what's that about?
Yeah, so Lady Gaga, partnering with the Born This Way Foundation, or her foundation, the Born This Way Foundation, partnered with the National Council for Behavioral Health to actually offer mental health first aid and train 250,000 individuals in mental health first aid in a relatively short period of time. And they were able to do that with great success. So I was able to be a part of that, and it was so exciting. We actually had an opportunity where we would hold classes leading up to the day of her concert.
Oh, how cool.
And some of the classes that happened, we would actually, the class that I taught, we started the class at 8 o'clock in the morning. We ended at 5, and her concert was at 7. So we went to the concert. It was just a really cool opportunity to really think about and digest and apply all of the messages that she sends about it's really that anybody can be that support in the life of a young person. And it's not just that anybody can be that support, but we need more people supporting young people.
Yeah.
So she's done a lot of work with and being supportive of what's going on nationally as well. Yeah.
So any new things coming down the road from the National Council in terms of mental health first aid in the United States?
Yeah, so the goal is that mental health first aid will be just as common as CPR. And that has been the goal for a long time, is that we want everybody in the public to know how to have a basic response to somebody who might need our support. And so you're going to continue to see a lot of work, I believe, done by a lot of different organizations. So I encourage people to turn to the National Council for additional information about different initiatives and possible legislation that'll be coming through and those types of things. So seek out the National Council for that. It's nationalcouncil.org or mentalhealthfirstaid.org, as well as locally. There'll be, I think, a lot more initiatives boiling up locally and statewide as people really start to recognize and get behind mental health first aid. So stay tuned for all that.
All right, excellent. And through Linden Oaks, we offer those classes regularly in a variety of different ways, sometimes at our facilities, and that's an opportunity for people to take the course at no cost.
That's great.
Including the manual that everybody gets, that nice book that has so much great information and resources in it. So yeah, you know, we'll continue to offer those classes on a regular basis. And organizations often ask us then to come in and provide that for the community as well. So there are so many different opportunities to teach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you have coming down the road in terms of what you're going to be doing over the next few months?
Yeah, so I continue my national trainer work. So again, I'm an independent consultant with the National Council for Behavioral Health. So I'll be doing lots of different instructor trainings, really all over the country, which I love doing that work. I also get to be involved with some work with the Instructor Summit, so where we pull together instructors from across the country into one location. This year we're in Washington, D.C., and I'll be able to chat with, work with, support instructors from really all over the country and start to really help them brainstorm new ideas of ways of getting this program in their communities. And then just a lot of other work around promoting mental health literacy. That's really the foundation for all the work. Sometimes people say, how do you decide what projects to take on? And for me, it's, you know, am I increasing our mental health awareness, increasing mental health literacy in communities? Do I have passion and drive for the work? And I absolutely do for mental health first aid. And if it meets all those criteria and I get to work with really cool people like you, then it meets the criteria for me to be able to continue to stay engaged in those projects.
All right. Yeah. And so you get to do that locally in your own community, but also across the country. Kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Yep. Nice. Will, say, like the Born This Way Foundation or other organizations be continuing to support mental health first aid, do you think, nationally?
Yeah, I would say stay tuned with that. I think there's a lot of individuals who are in lots of positions of leadership and positions of advocacy that are able to step forward, and I think we're going to continue to see that. We've seen that in the past, and I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see because we know it's common and we know that we need to do more.
Great. Great. Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to be celebrating then at Linden Oaks that 10,000 person class. We're kind of trying to figure out how we're really going to go about doing that, but I want to encourage people to join with us so that as we move past 10,000 people, we can say, you know, we're on to, you know, 15,000 or whatever that is, but so many more opportunities to offer that information.
Right. Yeah. Encouraging people to get out there and to really get into those courses. And I think about it's an opportunity to be a part of a movement. So again, it's great to have the information. It's great to be able to take that and be able to apply the information at home. And it's amazing to be a part of such a large movement. Again, an international movement.
Great. So thank you so much for being with me today, Jill. I appreciate you taking the time to come from Iowa to join us and to really dig into mental health first aid a little bit more. So thanks a lot. And thank you for being with us at Mental Health First Aid. And until next month, be well. And now's when we